While most presidents wore suit jackets, ties, and dress pants all the time, you don't have to any longer. Because Presidents Unplugged has merch. If you want to check out some new shirts to buy as a nice gift for somebody in your family or just something that you want yourself, go to presidentsunpluggedmerch.com to check out new shirts, hoodies, crew necks, and anything else that you can dream of. Now in many more colors and new designs coming soon. I'm very excited for the President's Unplugged merch store to finally be open. Now, let's get back to the show. Politics today can get a little messy. Ads directly attack the other candidate. Rumors are spread like wildfire. There's name calling. There's drama on social media. But trust me, America didn't invent mudslinging in the 21st century. Now, before I say the term about 100 million times in this episode, let me make sure we all know what mudslinging is. Mudslinging is directly making fun of the opposing political candidate with a rude or underlying tone. So instead of building yourself up, making you look like the better candidate by, doing good things, you make the other candidate look worse. That is mudslinging. When you could benefit yourself by doing great things, but instead you decide to be negative about the other candidate. So we got what mudslinging is? Okay, let's go look at its origin. The election of 1824 and 28. Before I even start this episode, I was originally going to just do this episode on the election of 1824. But diving deeper, I figured out that I might as well cover the election of 1828 as well, because they go hand in hand and show us that American politics, sometimes you got to get your hands a little dirty. Let's do this. So here we are, 1824. We are coming up on the 50th anniversary of our country. Hooray! We've done so much good. We've had like 7 wars. We're good, okay? 4 major candidates for president. Now, they were all from different political parties, right? No. All 4 candidates were for the same political party, the Democratic Republicans. Now, today, we hear Democrat and Republican in the same phrase, and we scream and we run away. Nah, it wasn't really like that. The Democrats and the Republicans, in most of their ideas, were actually more aligned than we think back then. So the party was combined into the Democratic Republicans. And as we'll see even in this episode, pretty quickly they split into the Democrats and later during the Civil War, the Republicans. Okay, so there's 4 Democratic Republican candidates. John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, Henry Clay, and William Crawford. Andrew Jackson wins the popular vote. With 4 candidates, you're not really gonna get more than 50% for one candidate, but he wins the popular vote. He gets the most. And Jackson also gets the most electoral votes with 99. By the way, this is not like our system today with 538 in total. It was a lot less. So 99 was a lot, but it wasn't the majority. It wasn't 51%. So instead of the country saying, okay, Jackson, you got the most, good job, buddy, you're the president. No. John Quincy Adams wasn't going to give up that easy. While Henry Clay and William Crawford weren't the biggest contenders in this election, John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson were the closest. John Quincy Adams had a little plan under his sleeve. Quincy Adams had a really good connection to a very important gentleman named Henry Clay. Wait, but Henry Clay wasn't even really in the running. He was a candidate, but he didn't get a lot of votes. But Henry Clay was the Speaker of the House. Huh, that's interesting. And Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams were good buddies. But here's the issue. They really weren't. Henry Clay knew John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson about the same. But Henry Clay was a little bit more corrupt than we think. Even though Henry Clay did some great things in history, this is probably the most shady. He made a deal with Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams, kind of privately. Behind closed doors, he said, "Hey, I'm probably not winning this election, but I'm the Speaker of the House, so I can probably sway people your way. But if you become president, you better give me some cushy job in your cabinet." After talking to Andrew Jackson, and he was like, I don't like that idea, John Quincy Adams, with that corrupt mind of his, said, "Oh, sure, that'll work." So, John Quincy Adams gets Henry Clay to really push for him in the House of Representatives, and what do you know? John Quincy Adams, even though he didn't win the popular vote, he didn't win the most electoral votes, he didn't even win the majority, John Quincy Adams won the presidency. And out of thin air, Adams appoints Henry Clay as the Secretary of State. And so starts what America still remembers today as the corrupt bargain. I could have only covered this in this episode today, because we're almost 7 minutes through. But here's the thing. The mudslinging, the hatred, the name-calling, it was only just beginning. Jackson was not putting down his hickory cane. Jackson had a big group of supporters. Jackson, even though he was fighting for the Democratic Republicans, this is so messed up that these New England aristocrats just get to rule the world however they want. He was not dealing with it. He starts a party called the Democratic Party. The Democrats. Even though the party isn't necessarily what the party was originally founded on today, the Democrats back then were made as the People's Party. Jackson was a pretty dangerous man, as said in the Dueling Dangerous Democrat episode. So Andrew was not giving up. And neither were his fans, his entourage, I'll say, of people that were supporting him. Jackson wanted a rematch. So let's fast forward 4 years. John Quincy Adams, first off, he's a smart guy, but he was also a weird guy. I can't wait to do his episode, because the title is definitely going to include skinny dipping. Wait, what? Yeah. John Quincy Adams loved to skinny dip in the Potomac River. Yeah, that episode's going to be a blast. Jackson's back 4 years later after John Quincy Adams' questionable presidency. He's not just running, he's seeking payback. And the 1828 campaign and election becomes one of the dirtiest in American history. While George Washington himself might not have had an Instagram page, Presidents Unplugged does. If you want to see some presidential content and overall updates on the show, come to the Instagram at presidents_unplugged. See you there. Jackson fairly, in multiple instances, calls Adams a corrupt leader. I mean, he literally was a big part of what America knows as the corrupt bargain. Adams's side called Jackson a dangerous hothead, one that was really unfit for office. Now, let me just be clear. after doing the Andrew Jackson episode, yeah, he had a pretty good range behind him. So, of all the points, this one sounds pretty good. But of all the facets of Jackson's, let's just say, aggressive life, one was brought up a little bit more than the other, and that was Jackson's marriage. The attacks were directed at his wife, of all things, but they also linked back to Jackson. Jackson had technically taken Rachel to marry him before her first marriage was dissolved, meaning that Jackson did marry a married woman. And just for future note, guys, don't marry a married woman. It probably won't end very well. But through all of this stuff happening, this did affect Jackson pretty deeply. He was troubled by it. But it affected his wife even more. Rachel Jackson, after hearing all this drama llama, just dies. Andrew Jackson was in deep mourning. He was depressed over, I don't know, his wife dying because people wouldn't shut their mouths about bad-mouthing her and their marriage. Yeah, this was not even politics anymore. This was personal. And Andrew Jackson said on multiple accounts, it wasn't anything else that killed her. It was John Quincy Adams and all of his campaigners making fun of his wife in downright corrupt ways. Yeah, corruption and John Quincy Adams go hand in hand. Andrew Jackson wins this election pretty easily. Whoa, 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 whoa. A murderer? A wife stealer? What? He does not sound like a good guy. Well, here's the thing. We have seen this, especially in the last, 20 years of politics, maybe even more recent than that. Often, America has to choose between the lesser of two evils. Now, do we want to do that? No, but sometimes it's our option. And as the American people, sometimes we have to pick the lesser of two evils. While Andrew Jackson was a murderer, while John Quincy Adams was a corrupt man, while Andrew Jackson and his marriage were probably not the best and most polite civil thing ever, John Quincy Adams also did some shady stuff in the background behind closed doors. Neither candidate was a clean slate. And it brings up the essence of politics today that we see in full force. Negative campaigning is extremely successful. You pull up a piece of information about the other candidate from even decades and decades before. If it's juicy enough, it'll get the people talking. And that really shows off what the election of 1824 and 1828 proves to us. 1824 only ended because of a corrupt bargain, a scam, something that was not deserved at all. The election of 1828 wasn't much better. It might not have been fueled with corruption, but the hatred and the downright rude nature of both candidates towards each other was full-fledged. And you might be wondering, as I'm covering these two elections in, November, the month of elections and Thanksgiving, I'm excited to not be as great as the spooky month of presidential assassinations, but the month of elections. Why am I covering this election? It's not the closest in history, and the two candidates are not really the most remembered presidents by everyone. I remember Andrew Jackson more personally, but I mention it because it shows us what we as Americans can't let elections become. And I really don't dive too deep into modern politics on Presidents Unplugged, but reading about this election, it did remind me of our last presidential elections. It is an issue when Americans look at the drama of politics. Did you see what he said to him? Did she really have to mention that? Why are we talking like this? Pointing out the negative aspects, pointing out the problems of each candidate, especially personal problems, should not be our number one priority in presidential elections. Because remember, we are picking the leader of our country, one that will lead us for the next 4 years. Not having a debate on who's the nicest person in our 4th grade class. We're better than that. And that's why I show these elections. The next 2 elections that I'm telling are the actual closest in presidential history. But I felt like it was necessary to cover the election of 1824 and 28 to prove to you a point that we as a nation should value more of the policy and decision that, our candidates will actually use to their benefit when they become the president. Not just a popularity contest of who did less bad things. And that is why the election of 1824 and 1828 are so important. And if you want to learn more about Andrew Jackson's presidency by itself, look into the Dueling Dangerous Democrat out now on Presidents Unplugged. And hopefully in the future I will get to John Quincy Adams as well. Tune in next Friday as we talk about the election of 1876. An election that was not decided by 500 million people. We don't even have that many people. An election that was not decided by 100 people, not even 10 people. 1 electoral vote. How did Rutherford Hayes end up beating Samuel Tilden in this nail-biting election? Learn more about that very soon next week on Presidents Unplugged. I'm Ty Svensson, and I'll see you soon. God bless. We need to make an executive decision now. The executive decision to follow Presidents Unplugged on Apple Podcasts or Spotify today to be notified weekly that your favorite presidential podcast has released new content. Now, let's get back to the show.